Hi, I'm Darrin Peppard. Welcome to the Leaning into Leadership podcast, the podcast dedicated to today's hardworking leader. Join me every Sunday for leadership insight, inspiration, and a little pep talk to keep you rolling down your road to awesome. Hey there, friends. Welcome into episode 70 of the Leaning into Leadership podcast. Just amazing. 70 episodes. Who would have ever thought? My guest on the show today is Elijah Carbajal. And if you don't know Elijah, holy cow, folks, you need to know Elijah Carbajal. Let me tell you a little bit about him. So Elijah is a teacher who followed in the footsteps of teachers in his family. He has served as an educator in the state of New Mexico since 2014 and is currently a Title I reading interventionist, along with being the host of the Shut Up and Teach podcast, which also is awesome. He is the author of a new book, A Place They Love. Elijah works hard to make school and his classroom a place that students love, and that will clearly come through in this episode. He also loves to spend time with his wife, Tracy, and his cat, Nala. I will tell you, I've had the opportunity in person to hang out with Elijah and Tracy, and man, I will tell you what, they are next level. I love both of them. They are absolutely intense and absolutely awesome and truly, truly care about education. Elijah and I sat down and had a conversation, really not about a specific topic. Now, we began by talking a little bit about his book journey, but we also managed to get to calibrated evaluation conversations. We talked about the crosswalk between being an author and being a musician, between being a teacher and being a musician, and also some of the work now that Elijah is beginning to lead with professional development specific to the ed tech space. It was a fantastic conversation. I can't wait for you to hear it, and you're going to catch all of that right on the other side of this. Hey friends, got some big news for you. The entire month of May, I am dedicating the Leaning into Leadership podcast to our aspiring, rising, and brand new administrators. Each episode of the Leaning into Leadership podcast will focus not only through a specific guest, but through a specific topic around how do we best prepare brand new, rising, and aspiring leaders to be successful in their job. You're going to hear from some incredible guests. You're going to hear some clips from previous episodes. You're going to get a special midweek drop every Wednesday during the month of May that focuses on those individual tips and insights that help you be the very best that you can possibly be if you are an aspiring, rising, or new administrator. Just stay tuned to the Leaning into Leadership podcast, folks, because you are going to love it. I cannot wait. Make sure that you share out the episodes and go and give us a review. 5-star reviews are awesome, just like this one from G. Lules. I hope I'm saying that right. Maybe it's Jules. But Jules will said this: if you are looking for a podcast to provide energy, leadership, advice, and wisdom, this is the podcast for you. Darrin does a masterful job of pulling out wonderful reflections from his guests and sharing his own powerful experiences with the show. Regardless of your position, I know you will find great value from each episode. Thank you, G. Lules or Jules, for this amazing 5-star review. Make sure, folks, you give us a 5-star review and share the show with somebody you know who will also love leading into leadership. Have you ever found yourself in professional development thinking, how is this supposed to help me be a better leader? Folks, PD for Leaders needs to focus on leadership. Introducing High Performance Leadership Teams, a 2-day workshop from Road to Awesome. In this 2-day workshop, we focus on getting the team very clear on their shared values, direction, and mission. Getting to know the house and understanding the strengths that each of us bring to the table and how we best leverage those. We focus on how we go about getting the work done. We focus on team dynamics. And we focus on how it is that we continue to evolve together as a team. Hey, right now, it's a tough time to be a leader, and it's really difficult to grow together as a leadership team unless you're intentional. High Performance Leadership Teams is exactly that, an opportunity to be very intentional about your team. Hey, leaders, I want to work with your team. I want to help set you up for success. Send me an email at darrin.peppard@roadtoawesome.net or shoot me a direct message on social media. Let's get your leadership team on the road to awesome with High Performance Leadership Teams. Hey friends, April is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, and here at Road to Awesome, we're really excited to share a brand new children's book titled I'm Autistic and I'm Awesome. I'm Autistic and I'm Awesome is an illustrated children's book that celebrates the uniqueness of our children on the autism spectrum. Families and friends can use this book to come together, share their experiences, and celebrate the superpowers gifted to their children as they make and navigate their own world. This book is for everyone, families, parents, siblings, and friends who cherish their relationship with someone who is autistic and awesome. This amazing new book by Derek Danziger is available now at roadtoawesome.net and on Amazon.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get on to the episode.
All right, Elijah, welcome into the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. How you doing today, man?
Hey, Darrin, I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for asking.
So just really quick, for my listeners who maybe don't know you, quick elevator version, who you are, what you're up to, that kind of thing.
Right on. Well, I'm Elijah. I like long walks on the beach. No, but I am, my name is Elijah Carbajal. I'm a Title I reading interventionist out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. I mentioned earlier that I'm married to my beautiful wife, Tracy Taylor. Some of y'all might be familiar with her. She was over at Teach Better and gave an awesome presentation there. But we got married. We're almost a year into our marriage now, and I've explored some things in education. I podcast. I do a little bit of podcasting called Shut Up and Teach, and I'm actually coming up on 2 years of doing that, so that's pretty awesome. Didn't imagine it would go that far, but here we are. And I've written a book, which I'm also very excited about, very proud of. It's called A Place They Love. It was published through EduMatch Publishing, and it actually was released October 14th, which was the first day of the Teach Better conference. So that was like a bonus, like a little cherry on top for me on that release day. So, just super, super excited and thrilled to be part of the EduMatch family and have that book out. And I'm all about making school fun, making school exciting and enjoyable for everyone there. And that's a little about me.
Yeah, no, I like that. And, there's a few things in there I want to come back to, but first I want to go right at, October 14th. So we're all, at the Teach Better conference. And I know for a lot of people, that was the first conference back in person that they had attended. I think it was probably my third or fourth, but there were a lot of people, this is the very first one. And then just add to all that excitement that was the release date for your book. And I know you and Tracy, along with a lot of folks. I know Mandy was there from EduMatch. She was really, really stoked about things. And I think it really had to be a little bit surreal for you to be together with everybody at a conference, and that's the day that your book launched. So maybe just talk a little bit more about that.
It was pretty surreal, walking in and, I had, like I said, it was the release date. So I don't have any copies of any books, but I'm walking in, I've got this, display with QR codes to, all the sites where people can order from, and I'm setting it up, and I'm just like, overwhelmed, like, holy crap, like I've got a book out, like it just dropped today. And then that day, it did hit number one on the Kindle version, actually hit number one, and it was kind of floating at number one for a day. So, like just that on top of it, and just the overwhelming support from everybody there at Teach Better. I know that I know that Ray Hewer gave a big shout out and all that. So I was, just super appreciative of everything that Teach Better did to help kind of promote the book and help me have a great, successful day with that. And also thankful for Mandy Froelich, like you mentioned, she was there, but we recorded our book launch together, which, was released that day, obviously. And so, I'm just super thankful for everyone who helped with, the process of making, putting it all together and, the whole editing thing. You're a published author yourself, so how that goes
Yeah.
and what all goes into that. So yeah, just super appreciative of that. And so that made that day, just like, yeah, this is cool, but it was also a moment of I had moments to reflect on, like, wow, I've like this was a long process and this was a whole thing and here it is. So
Oh yeah. So let's just talk a little bit more about not necessarily what's in the book, but your process of getting to the book, because that's something that a lot of educators and more educators now are becoming published authors. There are a handful of the indie publishers like EduMatch or like us at Road to Awesome that are talking with educators all the time about hey, I've got this idea for a book. Maybe just share a little bit of your journey, Elijah, from hey, I've got this idea to October 14th, 2022. You got a live book. Maybe just a little bit of that journey.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So it actually goes back to Teach Better 2019. So while I was there, I had no desire to be an author at this point, no clue that I would be writing a book. I was just going there to learn. I had connected with Becky Schnexer and Mike Earnshaw, so I was excited to meet them. But then, there were other speakers there: Adam Welcome, Dave Burgess, all these fantastic authors and educators, that I wanted to go learn from. But one of the big things that I took away there was like, you need to be true to yourself. Like you need to be true to who you are as an educator. And so it got me thinking, well, who am I as an educator? And so I wanted to start reflecting on my practice and reflecting on the things that I was learning. And so for me, the best way to do that is to write. And so I started blogging. And, a few months in, this is probably around January or so, January, February, I start kind of looking and I'm like, dang, there's kind of this like running theme throughout the blogs. And it was, school should be a place that kids love. School shouldn't be boring. School shouldn't be the place kids are dreading to go to and just excited to leave. Like, it was all of this, like, I want school to be engaging and exciting and fun and safe and relaxed. And just honestly a place that kids loved. And so that's where the title came from, A Place They Love. But before I got there, I had kind of my doubts, like just because there's a theme doesn't necessarily mean it's like a book. Like, it's just something I'm learning at the time. But I had lots of encouragement from my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, but Tracy was a huge encouragement, just telling me, just go for it. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, and she said, if no one else reads it, I'll read it. And, that for me was like all the encouragement I needed to like go out and just put it out there. So, so I pitched to a couple different publishing companies. One of which said, hey, we've got books similar to this. It's not that we don't like what you got. We just got books similar to this. The next company, when I heard back from them, it was right after COVID had hit. And it was EduMatch Publishing. And they had said, hey, we're not taking any new, we're not taking anybody new right now because of COVID and all that. We're putting things on hold. So, I waited and just kind of figured, well, maybe that's a sign. It's just not meant to happen, but I kept all that in the back of my mind. Started podcasting and, exploring more things and still doing all these reflections that still had this same theme running through them. So fast forward to about January, February 2021, I pitch again to EduMatch Publishing, and this time, I get an email back from Dr. Sarah Thomas, who wants to meet with me and, says, hey, we're excited about this. We want to make it happen. And, I was just completely overwhelmed because he was like, I had no idea, like when I started doing all that, reflecting on who I was as an educator, that I was going to lead to that. And so, just leading up to even that point was really surprising and exciting all at the same time. But actually writing the book itself, the process of writing the book, I had most of it written when I pitched it to EduMatch Publishing. And so there were maybe 2 or 3 chapters that I added to it. And then lots and lots of editing, as you know, lots and lots of editing, multiple rounds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, multiple rounds, and just going back and reflecting and trying to find the best words for things and find the so I can get my message across. But that part was actually really nerve-wracking at first. Like when I first put it out there, I was like, okay, great, like they've got the manuscript, this is great, like I'm on my way. And then I got that first comment from Mandy Froelich, and I was like, holy crap, somebody's reading my book, and like they're giving me feedback on it, and they're critiquing it. And like then I got the confirmation from Sarah Thomas, like, hey, Sarah Thomas has commented on your, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy and really nerve-wracking because I poured so much of myself into this, and people are reading it, and I'm like, well, gosh, well, duh, people are going to read it, but like, am I ready for the critiques and all that stuff, even from my publisher? And but the way I started thinking about it was like a music artist and like their producers, right? So the producer is going to help that artist get the best sound that they can possibly get out of their instruments, out of their vocals. They're going to help them find the right melodies and things like that. And so I started thinking about Sarah Thomas and Mandy Froelich is kind of like my producers, and me more as like a musical artist is like, hey, they're just trying to get the best sound out of you in this case. And so they're not working against you, they're working for you. They're working with you to help get the best sound out of your book. And so once I thought about it that way, everything kind of like eased up, and it was like, oh, like this is cool. Like we're working on the same team. We're all like working towards the same goal. This is great. And so from then on, the editing, like I said, there was tons of it, but I enjoyed it more. I really became like kind of like looking forward to editing through the book and getting the best sound that I could out of it. So, so yeah, that was kind of the process of writing through it. And, getting to that point was really exciting, and then a lot of work, way more work than I ever thought it would be. And, but just really, really happy with it overall. So really happy to be part of EduMatch Publishing as well. They helped me out tremendously. So
I think that's awesome. And I will say, Dr. Thomas, Mandy Froelich, they really do wonderful, wonderful work. And, I think they're both very inspirational. Definitely some 2 people that I really think super highly of. I want to go back to something that you were just saying there kind of towards the end, and maybe take it and go across the street with it. So you were talking about how that editing process, how you kind of shifted in your mind from it being really, almost like critique and being, maybe a little timid or a little bit like, oh boy, I'm afraid, to hear some criticism, and moving it into this space around, thinking of it like a music producer, and then just trying to get the best sound. And where I want to go across the street with that is now into your classroom, and that school leader, that administrator, that whomever it is that evaluates you, when you look at getting feedback in the classroom. And I want to focus first on you as a teacher with your supervisor. I'm going to crosswalk this in a minute to you working with kids as an interventionist. But how do you view that process? And are there some parallels that you can draw now looking at your editing process with your evaluator trying to get the best sound out of you as a teacher?
Yes. That's something that I've been thinking about recently. Is that evaluations should always be to help grow the teacher. You know what I mean? It's like if it's just,
Yeah.
I've come from districts, where it was like, yes, we're going to grow you, but we're also looking for the gotcha moment. And so there was, I don't feel like there should be a lot of those gotcha moments. It should be a chance for you as the teacher to have that conversation with your administrator following an evaluation to say, hey, how can, I'm going to go use the terms that I used earlier, how can we get the best sound out of my teaching? And so I'm really starting to view evaluations as that conversation to grow myself. When I have an evaluation, I want to grow myself. So I'm really starting to look at it as that opportunity and a chance to have those sorts of conversations. Now, I know you talked about how it applies to students. Now, one thing I will say
Yeah.
this, I was way too harsh looking back I'm a reading interventionist now, so I don't necessarily grade writing per se. Um, but I look back at my time as a classroom teacher and I'm like, holy cow, I was really harsh on some kids when it came to editing because, grown adult, teacher, you know, went through multiple rounds of editing and finding typos and, little, misspellings, stuff like that. Even when I got the proof copy, I still looked through and I was like, man, there's a typo right there. There's a typo right there. And so,
Yeah.
it really made me think like, holy cow, we're kind of harsh on students, or I was anyway. I don't know about every teacher, but I can say I was looking back. It's kind of harsh on their editing of like in the grading process of like, you missed a period. So I'm taking, a half a point off for that or whatever the case may be. And that's like, maybe we need to kind of ease up on that a little bit, like
Yeah.
if it's to help grow me and get the best sound out, it should be to help grow the students and get the best sound out of their writing as well.
I think that's fantastic, and I want to go maybe just one step further with that. I love where
Hmm.
you went with
Yeah.
that. I think about you've talked very highly and appropriately so of both Sarah and Mandy with EduMatch and how they helped as a team. I mean, even you mentioned so here comes the proof, and oh, there's a typo there. Same thing happened with my book. There was a couple of typos when we got the proof. I know when we're getting ready to release a book here at Road to Awesome, same thing. It's Jess, it's myself, it's the author. Even then in the proof, we're going to find maybe one thing or something like that. My point is a lot of eyes go into getting that best sound.
Hmm.
I'm wondering, and this is just maybe a hypothetical question, maybe it's more of a educational philosophy question. When you think about grading and you think about maybe that you were a little too harsh, is having just one perspective on a grade really the best way for us to be grading our students?
You know, that's a really interesting question, and it makes me think of a practice that we used to have at the first school that I started teaching at, where we were we sat down together and we looked at a piece of writing, and we all sat down to collaborate and say, what grade would this be according to the rubric? We had a rubric and we evaluated it, and it was really interesting to find because everybody's grading was off. And so we really had to stop and say, you know what, we need to calibrate, and kind of come to an agreement of this is what is proficient, this is what is, a nearing proficient score, and this is advanced or whatever, what have you. And so we helped calibrate that. But then we had three writing prompts a year, beginning, middle, and end, where kids had to do like an opinion writing one year, and then the next year it was like a narrative and stuff like that. So it would change from year to year, but we calibrated at the beginning of the year. And then we sat down not with our kids writing, but we sat down with another group. So it was like me, I was teaching fourth grade. So it'd be myself and another fourth grade teacher grading, another fourth grade teacher's students' work. But we had that trust to do that because we had built that accountability of this is what we're going to hold ourselves to as far as our grading. And so having multiple eyes on it in this case was always a good idea, I thought, and the teachers would come back from time to time, not always, but from time to time say, hey, you gave my student this grade. I have a question because I think, and then the conversation surrounding the grade would start, and then the grade would either fluctuate. Okay, we can agree to, adding a couple points or whatever the case may be. So I do think in this case there that maybe having multiple points of view on an assessment might actually be, especially when it comes to writing, might be beneficial.
I think where I was going with that, and you went into a place that I like even better. We need to be able to find that consistency, I guess, across grading. I like that you're likening that to that work with writing. And actually, I would say that work that you're describing, where you guys are working to develop consistency across a rubric so that it's equally applied, I guess, to every one of those prompts that are graded, I think is really powerful. And now I'm going to walk it back up in the opposite direction of where we just went, back to administrators with teachers. A lot of the work that I do right now with coaching administrative teams is working on exactly that. We call it inter-rater reliability. In other words, if I come into your classroom and I'm going to, evaluate you, if the person right next to me instead came in and evaluated you, would you see roughly the same, the same outcomes? I think this is just one of those practices, and I don't even know if I'm leading to a question here. I'm just kind of, working off of what you just talked about. But I think that's one of those practices that we have to get better at in education, that we don't feel that only my view is going to be the correct view, or that I see the same things that somebody else does. When I'm bringing groups, or when I'm working with teams around walkthroughs, let's not just go one person, let's go multiple, because then we can talk about, what did you see? What did you see? What did you see? Because different sets of eyes are going to see different things, right?
Yeah. There was a district that I came from where that was kind of the thing. So we had a principal and an assistant principal who would come in usually at the beginning of the year and do walkthroughs, and then they would sit down afterwards and say, what did you see? What did you not see? How can we calibrate, to make sure that we're on the same page? Because what they would do was, in your first semester, your evaluator might be your principal, but in your second semester, it might be your assistant principal. And so they wanted to mix it up that way. So they were evaluated by both administrators, but they calibrated to make sure that it was fair in both of those instances. So just very similar to what you were talking about. Yeah.
That's one of the things that I love about doing this podcast, is being able to have conversations that, like in this case, Elijah, when you and I first jumped on, before we hit record, probably wouldn't have thought this was where our conversation is going to go. But definitely, I mean, it's going into a really great place, and I appreciate that. And it just kind of makes me want to then toss it over to have you talk just a little bit about your podcast, because I know you do something very similar. You're looking for those organic conversations, and just trying to do everything you can to learn and grow. I know that's one of my primary motivators for having the podcast. Tell us a little bit about your podcast, but also what are some things that you have learned and been able to maybe grow as an individual, as a professional, as a result of doing your podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast started as a way of two things: reflection and connection. So it started first and foremost reflection, because I was too scared to interview anybody when I first started. So it was really just me sharing my thoughts. Hey, I learned this lesson today at school. Yeah. This is something I've been reading about, researching, whatever, all those reflections. And, but then I had put in the description with honest conversations. And so I said, at some point, I'm going to have to start interviewing people. So, finally stepped out and, I think Becky Schneckser was the first person I interviewed, and, the conversation went great. So, as I do it more and more, I ease into that, and become a little more comfortable as the host. But one thing I've learned, I would say, we'll talk about what the podcast is all about, and then I'll get into that, what I learned, because I think that's how you wanted to go about that. But so the podcast really centers around those two things: reflection and connection. From time to time, you'll hear me do a solo recording of something that I'm learning as an educator. It's been everything from branding your classroom. I had an episode called "I'm Proud of You," where I just wanted to give a shout out to teachers and, let them know, hey, if no one else has told you they're proud of you, let me be the one to do that. So, the reflections are, range from a number of things. And then the connection part of it is my guests that I bring onto the show. And I've been able to speak with some really great people, librarians, principals, other teachers, and so other authors. So it's been a great way for me to connect with them and learn from them and grow from them. But one thing that I've learned on, by podcasting and also listening to other podcasters, such as yourself, with guests on the show, is how much talking am I doing as the host? That was one thing I was worried about was, oh, I got to have all the right questions. I got to have all the right things to say. And it was just like, you know what? Like, just let the conversation happen organically and let them share, like highlight them. And so that's been a really important thing for me, is to highlight my guest in the best way that I can. But without the pressure of, I have to do it perfect. So there's that. The other thing I've learned, the other thing I've learned is that I don't have to be married to my podcast. And so there's been times where, it's like, I don't have anything to say, or I'm going to take the whole summer off. I'm not going to record anything. I'll just, share old episodes or whatever, but I'm not going to record anything because I'm taking the summer off. That's been good for me, because I felt at first like I have to be committed to it. And yes, when I'm doing it, I try to be consistent with putting out episodes frequently and, staying on top of it, and being organized with it. But at the same time, it's like, if I can't get a guest, this week, or if I have nothing to say this week, I have nothing to say and I don't have a guest, and it is what it is. It'll be okay. I'm not married to the podcast in any sense. I want it to grow. I want to see impact. I want to see connection and reflection. But yeah, that's just been something I've learned is balancing that, that part of the education part of me and the personal side of me as well.
Well, it's super important that you do that. I mean, obviously, we've heard a lot about, just how much we have to take care of ourselves, and we have to not necessarily simply define ourselves by, what we do, whether that's the work you do in the classroom, your podcast, or whatever the case may be. We've got to make sure that there's that balance. Now, I would say I want to go off script, but I don't follow a script, as you know. Instead, I think I'm going to chase something that I see. Obviously, my listeners don't get to see what's behind you, but I see 3 guitars behind you. And I mean, obviously, they're not just sitting there as decoration on the wall while we're talking. Talk a little bit about those, and what your connection with music is. Yeah, tell me about 3 guitars on the wall.
Oh man, 3 guitars on the wall. That story starts a long time ago. So my dad was a drum major in high school, and was was fantastic at it, from what I understand. He showed me he didn't have a Letterman jacket, he had a Letterman sweater, but the whole thing is just covered with patches and awards from all these, competitions and stuff like that. but he came from a very musical family as well. His, my grandpa was a band director. My grandma played multiple instruments and taught music. And so, my dad and his two brothers played music all the time. There was always music playing in the house. So that love for music, I think, came from my dad and from my mom. My mom plays guitar. But it really came from the two of them, and, just letting us listen to music. I grew up, I'm a Christian, that's my faith. And so we'd spend every Sunday, it was driving to church, listening to gospel hymns and, stuff like that. And we get to church and sing, and then we go home and listen to more gospel hymns. And so, but just having those moments, to ride around and just have that access to music really fostered a love of music for me. So there's two guitars, on my right and left. There's an acoustic and an electric, but right in the middle is my bass guitar. And so bass is actually my first love, and I stumbled upon it by accident. So I was, there was a couple kids that, I knew that played guitar, and we had just set up my dad's drum set. My older brother was kind of messing around with drums and was really good at it. And so he said, we were talking like, we should totally start a band. Like, we got drummers now. Like, you can be drummer. Like, I play guitar. And I said, yeah, I'll play guitar too. Like, I'll be the rhythm guitar. You could be lead. And he goes, no, we need a bass player. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll learn to play bass. So it was actually on accident, and then I just ended up falling in love with it. So I've been playing bass since I was 14. So do the math, I'm 31 now. And then, picked up guitar, shortly after that. I took piano lessons from my aunt. That really helped grow my knowledge of music and the skills. But, music has been a big part of my life. I seriously do constantly listen to music. I don't know if you get the updates, like if you have an iPhone, or you get that update of like, this is your screen time. And it's like, I have like a crazy amount of screen time, but it's all music. Like, I'm not necessarily like scrolling through Facebook for hours. It's like I'm listening to music for hours. So it's been a big part of me. It's helped me get through a lot of dark times. It's helped me rejoice in those bright times. And I can't imagine a world without music, So it's just, that would just be sad.
Wow, that's awesome. And just that took me back just a little bit to, I guess, to close the circle in our conversation before I go to my last question, of us at Teach Better. And I think it was the last evening that you and Tracy were there. You and Tracy and I think there were a couple others involved in the conversation, Dave Schmittou, and I don't remember who else was at the kind of hanging around the table. But we had a really deep conversation about Eminem. I remember Tracy was wearing, an Eminem t-shirt, and or maybe that was you that was wearing the Eminem shirt. Actually, I think it was
Tracy.
But,
so it was Tracy, but I know people can't see today, but I've got on Kendrick Lamar on today. So, big. It's been like, rock and roll, punk rock, metal, all that, like country music, gospel, like I said, I grew up in church, so I know all the hymns and stuff, but a little bit of rap on the side as well. Yeah. But you were saying, we were having I remember that we were having that conversation about Eminem.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the things that you talk about when you're at a school conference, when you just don't want to talk about school. Right. We had a really great conversation about Eminem and actually a lot of different pieces of music that we talked about that particular evening. That was definitely a good memory, for sure. Yeah. So let's transition then into a quick talk about the final question that I ask everybody here on the Leaning into Leadership podcast, and that's just simply this: Elijah, how are you leaning into leadership right now?
So I'm leaning into leadership in a couple different ways. I'm starting to give more professional development at my school, and that's through a number of different ways. So I'm giving professional development coming up here in January about my book. and getting them excited because we're going to do a book study on it. But then I'm also the ed tech ambassador at my school. And so that's been really great because I've been able to learn and gather a lot of great ed tech resources and, give those back to teachers. I'm going to give professional development coming up here probably around the spring or so. I'm going to give some professional development surrounding some ed tech tools and resources. But this is kind of the big thing for me. And I know some people may get turned off by this. Some may be like, woohoo, go Elijah. But I decided this year that I was going to be our union Fed rep. And so we had talked about it, at the school that there hasn't been a Fed rep for like 5 or 6 years there. And so our principal is kind of she's like, I understand what the union is for. She said, but I would like a union rep here to kind of help guide me. She said, because I don't want to be in trouble. Like, I want to make sure that I'm, being equitable and fair and following the rules too. And so when I told her, hey, I decided to be the Fed rep here, she was actually really excited, which you don't always get from a principal, right? I don't always get that when it comes to union, but she was really excited and said, I'm going to lean on you for this because, she said, she's a new principal. She's doing a great job, but she's a new principal and learning, just like we all do. And so she said, there's things about, the negotiated contract that you might know that I don't know. She said, so I'm going to lean on you for that because I want to make sure that I'm being equitable and, following the rules here and that everybody gets along basically. And that everything's cool between teachers and admin and the district and all that. So, those are just a couple ways that I've really been kind of leaning into it. With being that's one more thing, with being the union rep, I'm a member of the instructional council. So I have a voice in that area as well. So, but it's not just me, there's other teachers that are doing a lot of similar stuff, and being on instructional council and all that, we're all kind of leaning into that as much as we can, but that's me for right now.
So I think that there's a lot of power there too. And by power, I don't mean, oh, I'm the union rep, therefore I have power. I mean, rather the power for you to be able to learn and observe and really just get a much better concept around how things function within the district, within the building. Mm-hmm. Maybe jumping up a little bit at about a 5,000 foot view every now and again in that role. So yeah, there may be some who are like, oh man, why would you do that? I'm one of those who's going to cheer you on and say, you know what, I think that's awesome. As a building principal, I had 3 different building reps in my building. We had a huge building, so I had a large group of building reps, but I met with them at least once a month collectively. There was one year I had actually the union president and vice president in my school. I was able to go right to them. So what your principal's talking about is really, really smart work. Instead of waiting around for something to become a problem, go and have a conversation.
Yes.
If it's not a good decision, don't do it. Run it by somebody. And I think it puts a lot of trust. The fact that she was excited that you're in that role says that she puts a lot of trust in you too. So definitely kudos on that. I think that's important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So just one final thing then really quick, Elijah. So the book, the podcast, social media, everything that you're doing for my listeners who really want to get in touch with you, want to get a copy of the book, want to listen to your podcast, how do they find you? How do they get in touch?
For sure. Okay. So I am probably most active on Twitter, and Facebook and Instagram is kind of about the same. But anyway, my Twitter and my Instagram handle are both the same. It's at Carbajal. So that's at Carbajeli. So that's my Instagram and Twitter handle. If you search Elijah Carbajal on Facebook, you'll find me. My podcast is available on most major platforms. So whatever you're using, whether it's Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google, If you just search for the Shut Up and Teach podcast, you'll be able to find it. So that's the podcast, and the book is available on multiple sites: EduMatch website, Barnes and Noble, and it is available on Amazon in 3 different formats on Amazon. So there's a paperback, hardback, and the Kindle.
Excellent. I will make sure, folks, that all of that stuff, if you were trying to really quick write that down or memorize the time in the show so you could come back and write it down later because you're driving, I'll put all of that stuff in the show notes so it's easy for you to get access to that. We'll hyperlink it so it takes you right where you need to be. Elijah Carbajal, thank you so much for joining me today on the Leaning into Leadership podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Darrin.
All right, once again, big thank you to Elijah Carbajal for coming on the show. You can definitely check out his podcast and his book. You'll find hyperlinks to both of those down in the show notes. And now it's time for a pep talk. So earlier this week, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast with John Acuff. And John and his guest were talking about perfectionism and how so often we will let perfectionism cripple us. We're not willing to take a chance because what we have started to put together, whether that's a book or we're going after a promotion or whatever the case may be, because it's not perfect, we don't put it out. We don't take the risk. It was just such an interesting conversation. And they made their way to that deficit mindset where, I don't have this particular skill, or, I'm not really good at this. And we allow those limitations to hold us back. It got me thinking about leaders, especially early career leaders. How often do we let those things that we have no control over get in our way? John followed it up with this incredible quote, and this is what I want to wrap up the pep talk with today. He said, "You are 100% of the people you are 100% in control of." I'm going to say it one more time because it's just that powerful. You are 100% of the people you are 100% in control of. Don't let the deficit mindset get in your way. Don't let the imposter syndrome creep in on you. And don't allow perfectionism to keep you from taking a chance on something that you want. Those are my thoughts for this week. Thank you for joining me on Leaning Into Leadership. Have a Road to Awesome day. Thank you for listening to the Leaning Into Leadership podcast, brought to you by Road to Awesome. Don't forget, click subscribe, give a review, and share this with somebody who might also enjoy leaning into leadership.